What has to happen for Lewis Hamilton, the undisputed king of Hungary, ends not only outside the points, but bent and self-accused of being useless? What happened in the 2025 Hungary GP was so serious that he even questioned his future in Ferrari. The Hungary Grand Prix has historically been one of Lewis Hamilton's favorite scenarios. Each pilot has a circuit that seems designed for their driving style, and Hungary was always that place for the 7-time world champion. In his years with McLaren and Mercedes, Hamilton turned this technical layout of chained curves and poor possibility of overtaking a fort. He dominated him so much that his name became almost synonymous with the circuit. 8 victories, 9 poles, more than 480 laps led and more than 280 points added only on this track. No other pilot has been so successful in one place. Beyond the statistics, what happened that weekend was a kind of symbolic collapse. In a season already marked by the pressure to demonstrate its value with Ferrari, the performance in Hungary showed a worrying disconnection with the car, with the environment, and even with its own confidence. The most alarming data was that not only did not progress in the race, but ended exactly where it started, 12th. There was no comeback, nor saving strategy, nor hidden rhythm. The race was linear, without a spark, and what is worse, with a feeling of absolute impotence. The final blow came to see that his partner Charles Leclerc, in the same car, achieved the pole position. ASF 25 that Hamilton could not control or explode, was taken to the limit by Leclerc on a brilliant lap. That direct comparison hurt more than any overtaking or error. It was no longer just about fighting Red Bull or McLaren, but of being surpassed by someone with the same material. This amplified a self-criticism rarely seen in the British pilot. To say, "I am useless," in front of the microphones of Sky Sports was not a strategy to divert attention or a measured statement. It was a brutal confession. It was, perhaps, the most vulnerable moment in the race of a multiple champion that rarely shows emotional cracks. Saturday's classification at the 2025 Hungary Grand Prix was the true epicenter of Lewis Hamilton's emotional collapse. Beyond the raw result in the table, eliminated in Q2 and condemned to start from position 12, what really impacted was the way he lived and expressed it. In a sport where pilots usually filter their emotions and maintain a control facade, Hamilton broke with that mold. The hardness with which he judged himself left the entire Formula One without words. He declared himself publicly as a useless, and suggested that the team probably have to change pilot. It was not sarcasm or exaggeration, but a raw statement and loaded with pain that showed an internal fracture that goes beyond track performance. The most disturbing of that Saturday was the context in which it happened. While Hamilton struggled to find a minimally competitive balance in his SF25, Charles Leclerc achieved a surprising pole position with the same car. And it was not an absolute domain of Monegasco from the beginning. Leclerc was about to be eliminated in that same Q2, but managed to sneak into the top 10 for just 15 thousandths. Then, in Q3 he took a perfect return that led him to the top. That progression brutally contrasted with Hamilton's stagnation. If Leclerc could extract the maximum of the car in similar conditions, what was failing exactly on Lewis's side? The explanation is not in the setup or in a failed strategy. It is in something deeper: trust. Since his arrival in Ferrari, Hamilton has tried to adapt to a car philosophy and a team that operates under a very different logic than he knew in Mercedes. That adaptation is complex, even for a world champion. In Hungary, that process seemed to have reversed instead of moving forward. The car dominated him, not vice versa. And that loss of control, both physical and mental, is what led him to self-written himself so lapidary. Formula One is, in essence, a mental sport as much as technical. And when the pilot disconnects emotionally from his work tool, the car, everything collapses. That is exactly what happened with Hamilton that Saturday. During the onboard cameras, he could see his constant struggle with the subwiring, with the overheating of tires, and with a car that did not respond to his commands as he expected. But there was also something more intangible, a kind of growing resignation as the laps passed. There was no aggressiveness, there was no hunter instinct that always characterized him in classification. And humiliation was not only technical but also symbolic. Being out in Q2 in its talisman circuit, the same where it has been unbeatable for years, it hit where it hurts the most. Budapest was his sanctuary. There he built a good part of his legacy. Seeing how that story crumbled in a single session was devastating, not only for him but for those who have followed him for more than a decade. Hamilton's face after getting out of the car said everything. There was no anger, there was sadness. A dense sadness which does not need words to be understood. That Saturday in Hungary not only marked a bad day in the office, it was the living representation of an emotional break with its surroundings, with your car and maybe with yourself. That day left an unanswered question floating in the air. Can a pilot as experienced as Hamilton recover faith in his driving when even his fetish circuit leaves him? Or are we witnessing the beginning of an identity crisis within the helmet of one of the greatest of all time? Formula One, as always, does not expect anyone. And Budapest 2025 left Hamilton alone, facing his own ghosts. On Sunday of Hungary Grand Prix 2025 I had, at least in theory, an opportunity for redemption for Lewis Hamilton. Formula One is full of stories in which a bad Saturday becomes a memorable comeback on Sunday. And if anyone knows how to write epic chapters on complicated days, that is Hamilton. However, this time, everything went backwards. The race, instead of offering an emotional and sports rematch, became a strategic trap that ended up sealing one of the darkest weekends of his career. Ferrari's decision was risky from the beginning. While most of the grid chose to start with middle tires, Hamilton was the only pilot who went on the track with the hard compound. The intention was clear, stretching the first stint to the fullest and gaining positions when others stop early. On paper, it was a logical play for someone who came out from the 12th position and needed to do something different to get into the fight. But what in theory was a bold play, in practice it became a ballast. From the first round, the strategy began to crumble. Hamilton lost 2 positions immediately, falling to the 14th place. With cold tires, the car did not generate enough temperature to enter the optimal performance window. The SF25 became nervous, clumsy at the entrance of the curves and without traction in the exit. From that moment on, Hamilton was trapped in a kind of mobile prison. A DRS train led by slower cars such as Oliver Bearman-Haas, Racing Bulls by Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar's RB. All of them were managing their own strategies, and none wanted to compromise their positions. The consequence was a technical bottling of which there was no way out. This type of DRS trains are particularly lethal in circuits such as Hungary, where the narrowness of the layout and the lack of long lines make it advance is almost impossible, even with a significant rhythm difference. On the radio, Hamilton expressed with frustration what everyone saw on the screen. He felt like a sitting duck. A metaphor that, in Anglo-Saxon slang, indicates being completely exposed, without response capacity, at the mercy of the context. He had no grip, he had no rhythm, and above all, he had no room to escape the trap that the strategy had imposed. But the most symbolic of everything happened when Max Verstappen, after making his stop at boxes, emerged behind Hamilton and reached it with a hard time. The Verstappen onboard camera showed crudely how Hamilton was not a rival, but one more obstacle on the road. There was no battle. There was no defense. Only a clean, fast, and with a speed difference that hurt to see. At that moment, the narrative was completely broken. The multiple champion, once the great reference of Formula One, was being bent without resistance by his most media ex-rival. From there, Hamilton's career slid towards anonymity. It was no longer about tracing, but minimizing damage. But he couldn't do that. His rhythm was so poor that he could not recover the lost positions at the beginning. It ended in the same position where it began, 12th. Outside the points, without showing a single competitive lap and with the aggravating person of having been strategically surpassed by almost the entire middle squad. That strategic trap, poorly executed and worse defended on the track, evidenced not only a disconnection between pilot and equipment, but a lack of ability to react in real time to what happened in the race. Ferrari did not correct the course, and Hamilton also did not impose his experience to suggest a planned change. Everything remained in the hands of fate, and fate did not forgive. In modern Formula One, the difference between an intelligent strategy and a death sentence is a matter of seconds. And in Hungary, Hamilton fell into the trap without the possibility of escaping. The question that was floating later was as simple as it is blunt. Can Ferrari give Hamilton a car and a strategy that is at the height of his legend? Because in Budapest, the answer was a resounding. What is lived by Lewis Hamilton in the 2025 Hungary Grand Prix opens a crack that goes far beyond a simple bad career. Because this was not just a sports stretch. It was an emotional, strategic, and symbolic fracture. A pilot accustomed to mastering that circuit, turned into a spectator of others, caught in his own car without tools to react. Not only was he overcome by his rivals, but by his own partner with the same car, on his strongest track, with a difference that hurts even to mention. The great unknown is now if, physically and mentally, reverse this trend in the remainder of the season, that we must also ask ourselves if Ferrari is really in a position to build a winning project around it. Because Hamilton's talent does not disappear from one day to another. But it can be neutralized if the environment does not respond, if the pilot-team synergy is not consolidated, and if the failed strategies continue to condemn their Sundays to irrelevance. Is Ferrari the right place for Lewis to close his career with glory, Or will he become the stage of a slow farewell? The clock runs and the championship does not expect. Can Hamilton recover confidence? Can Ferrari reconfigure your strategy and give you the necessary weapons to fight? Or will we simply witness how one of the greatest of all time is slowly fading at the bottom of the platoon? Leave me your opinion in the comments.